Hi everyone, in this lecture we'll be talking about developmental tasks in later adulthood. So a significant developmental task of this life stage involves redefining personal goals and sense of purpose. Your text describes this really well, stating that it involves learning to accept the reality of one's life and formulating a vision for this new stage. Now, this is no easy task, and in reality, it's quite multifaceted. During this stage, individuals are able to recognize and experience pride in their accomplishments thus far, hopefully. But in some cases, this reflection on the past may elicit some difficult thoughts and feelings. Individuals in this stage must acknowledge and process uncomfortable emotions about goals that they failed to attain, as well as goals that they unfortunately will not be able to achieve. Feelings during this process can include disappointment, frustration, regret, grief, and despair. Realistically, many individuals do become stuck here and are unable to reimagine their lives and develop goals to keep them moving forward. This is where we may see bitterness, depression, and hopelessness as folks come into therapy. Ideally, however, individuals are able to find meaning, purpose, and refine goals for this stage of their lives, either independently or through our help. It helps for them to recognize that although some goals may have not been met, this is not the end stage of life, and there are still opportunities for goal development and attainment, especially if these goals are developed thoughtfully and realistically. The ability to develop or modify life goals and engage in behaviors that are aligned with these goals contribute to life satisfaction during this stage of life. Life satisfaction is defined in your text as an overall assessment of feelings and attitudes about your life. Adults who think this is a time for wrapping things up and when life is ending will understandably experience little life satisfaction. Instead, goals should be seen as important and possible to achieve during this period. When thinking about goals, we can classify them into a few different domains. Social, so relationships, family, friends; work, finances, health or fitness, leisure, and self-reliance. During this period of life, goals in the domains of social relationships, self-reliance, leisure, and health and fitness seem to be the most connected to life satisfaction. These goals may fluctuate with regard to who their target is. For agentic goal orientations, the foci will be achievement, power, and personal fulfillment. Alternatively, for communal goal orientations, the foci will be relational and involve contributions to others or to the greater good. Next, we need to consider how one attempts to attain these goals, and this is called goal-related action. This is where balancing opportunities, abilities, and resources comes into play. An adult needs to be able to match activities they engage in with their valued goals in order to experience satisfaction. An individual who has a goal for social intimacy, for example, but who invests all of their time in work will not attain this goal and will not experience satisfaction. Speaking of social intimacy and relationships, social integration and feeling as though you belong is an important piece of life satisfaction. Part of this may be because the prioritization of social life goals and the maintenance of relationships are feasible given the limited resources in later adulthood in a way that some other goal domains may not be. For example, goals that are highly physical or goals that involve finances and wealth. Although this doesn't mean that any relationship will bring satisfaction necessarily. Negative relationships, such as those categorized by pessimism, criticism, conflict, etc., as well as marital discord, tend to have the opposite effect on life satisfaction. One significant issue that appears to get in the way of social integration in later adulthood is having too strong of a prioritization of occupational or financial attainment in middle adulthood, which doesn't leave room for fostering strong relationships that will last into later adulthood and may actually ostracize friends or family who might otherwise be resources during this stage of life. Another factor that influences life satisfaction is personality. Now, you might think, well, personality is who you are and it can't be changed. And to a certain extent, you'd be right. But while personality is stable in many ways, it can and does also change over your lifespan. So, knowing which traits might help life satisfaction may be helpful because we can encourage them in our own lives as well as in those of our clients. The factors I will mention briefly are listed here. So first, extroversion. Given what we know about social integration, it makes sense that being extroverted, meaning being outgoing and enjoying social interaction, would be associated with life satisfaction. Part of this involves not being constrained by social desirability and what people think or say about you or certain behaviors. Connected to this is an openness to experience, which includes being curious, exploring the world, and being enthusiastic about new experiences. This fits with this new stage of life where there tends to be more time to explore things that you couldn't when you were too busy with work, school, raising children, etc. Feeling useful and competent is another factor for life satisfaction. Being involved in things that give you a sense of purpose can help to keep you going and feel like you're making a difference. For example, volunteering, spending time with grandkids, mentoring, contributing to your community, etc. And finally, having a sense of control over one's life, time, and choices is an important factor for life satisfaction. Now, it's important to remember that just as there are things that improve life satisfaction, there are also things that do not. And while some of them are changeable to some extent, there are others, such as shifts in memory or physical ability, that are less so. I'll talk about these in next week's lecture. In the rest of this lecture, I'll discuss the shifting of new roles that occurs during this life period. First is grandparenthood. For many older adults, grandparenthood becomes an important role, a role gain that has the potential to lead to significant revisions in life function, feelings of purpose, and behaviors. This, of course, depends on the extent to which grandparents are involved in the family and how the interconnected family members permit and support this interaction. Combining these two factors, the longitudinal study of generations found 5 main intergenerational family types that are gone over in much more depth in your text. First is tight-knit. These are families who are emotionally close, live near one another, interact often, and give and receive help. Grandparents in this category may take on the roles of surrogate parent, reservoir of family wisdom, or fun seeker. Next is sociable. These are emotionally close families that have frequent contact but do not offer much help. Grandparents here might take on a more formal role, such as just wanting to know how everyone's doing once a week or something like that. Providing some wisdom, or just being really distant, meaning that they only come around for special occasions, for example. Next is intimate but distant. These grandparents have a high level of agreement with their parents and grandchildren and feel close, but they rarely interact. This may be due to living far away, being too busy, not feeling welcome, or not wanting to overstep their boundaries. These grandparents take on more distant roles or may occasionally provide wisdom from afar. Next is obligatory types, which are those who live close by and have frequent contact, but are not emotionally close and don't have much in common. In this case, there is structural solidarity, but grandparents still take on distant relationships. And if they do help, it's out of a sense of obligation rather than a sense of desire or wanting to connect. Finally, detached family types are exactly what they sound like, detached, not emotionally close, not involved. When grandparents are involved, this role may help them to take pride in their parenting achievements, feel a renewed sense of purpose, keep busy, experience personal growth, and remain connected to the contemporary world. One final note, there are also situations where the grandparent takes on the custodial role of parent for the child. During your assessment, it's helpful to figure out the extent of grandparent involvement and the familial type. Widowhood is another role that is common during this age. Among those between the ages of 65 and 74, 6.8% of men and 20% of women would describe themselves as widows, and of course, this increases with age. Naturally, the experience of widowhood brings difficult emotions, grief, and significant changes to social support. Some of the associated stressors are dependent on the generation. Whereas in the past, it was more common for women to stay out of the labor market and be unfamiliar with finances, the next generation of older women will likely be in a different position financially. Nonetheless, the female widows you encounter may still have to adjust to economic shifts and to figuring out how to take over as the head of the household. Similarly, in heterosexual homes with traditional gender norms, men who lose their wives may be losing a lot of instrumental and emotional support. For both widows and widowers, involvement in a new relationship, once the individual has been able to grieve and mourn and is ready to do so, is associated with well-being. Finally, this age period is one of leisure roles where older adults are able to become involved in activities that bring renewed opportunities for fun, companionship, opportunities to enhance feelings of competence, relaxation, self-expression, and at its most basic, something to fill the time that might otherwise be fixated on loss and sadness. Some potential leisure activities are given in your text and can include things like volunteering, mentoring, leisure sports, painting, drawing, and many others. Most of these activities will allow the individual to feel a sense of joy and purpose and to give them something to do when they no longer have obligatory responsibilities like work or childcare. Okay, that is everything for this lecture. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you for listening.